right, we're going to jump in and we are in session number 2 of our Alchemy in the Labs. And for those returning, welcome back. For those who are new, we run these once a month, and I got a little surprise at the end. I'm going to announce about an addition we're going to do this year. And actually have some fun things we're going to do this year. So I'll tell you guys later on as we get through the topic and close out today's session. So welcome back. And today we are going to be talking CyberArk. And we're going to be talking about this thing called their certificate in the 47-day TLS problem that we're going to go through, and we're going to highlight what you got to watch out for. And I got a really good panelist today. I'm super excited. We spent some time earlier going through this topic and cannot wait to dive in and learn about this a lot more. So my name is Pete Downing. I'm the host of the Alchemy in the Lab, and with me I got Nick. And Nick, you're at CyberArk. How long have you been at CyberArk? And give yourself a quick intro where you're based and how's things in your neck of the woods.
There you go. Well, I've been at CyberArk now. We're going to talk about, we'll include Venafi about 5.5 years. So that's the good news. I'm actually based in McKinney, Texas.
All
So
right.
sitting here in the great state of Texas, enjoying a little bit of better weather now. It's going to get a little bit warmer outside. And I'm looking forward to getting these folks up to speed on 47 days and getting a lot of really good questions today, Pete.
All right, we're going to jump in, and as always, we are encouraging lots of question and answer today. We have the Q&A dialogue box ready to go. I'll be monitoring it, so please ask questions. As we roll through today, I have a challenge for the audience. And the audience, I want you to really think about, how many of these certificates you have out there today. And what's the impact if even one expires? I don't care if it's your main website, the certificate that supports an application internally with the web portal. Think about it. What if one expires? And then layer it on and say, what if one expires and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, or it's on a Sunday in the middle of the day and you're sitting at a baseball or softball tournament like I usually am on a weekend because I got kids who play sports or whatnot. Think about that one pesky cert that expires. All right. So as we go through it, think about that notion today. And then, yes,
Hold on a
sir.
second, Pete. Go
Yep.
back to that. This is actually what I think Alchemy does really well because this is the connection most TLS teams and folks don't do. It's that connection between that certificate and the business. That's the impact. That's what this question really gets to. How does this impact our business? And I think from an Alchemy standpoint, you guys really do a good job of making that connection between the tech and the business. So this is one to really think about because this is actually how you get your senior executives to understand the importance of something as small as a certificate.
Yeah.
So
And,
I love
and
this question and I'm stealing it. So I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. It kind of hit me after we talked today, and I just threw it in there just because I think it's something you got to think about is that one certificate, and that's key, right? And then put these dates in your head, and we're gonna circle back to these dates at the end and say why these dates matter. And Nick's gonna bring up some great content and highlight, what we need to pay attention to when it comes to TLS certificates, but just the management aspect of it and how it could affect the core business.
CyberArk, we were recently acquired by Palo Alto Networks. We are a piece of Palo Alto Networks. We are a company. The good news is this, we are actually a pillar amongst the other pillars of Palo Alto Networks. So we are now becoming, we're integrating ourselves, but we are a standalone identity pillar. That's what we stand for. And machine identity management falls within that. So the good news is this is one of those better together stories that actually makes sense. And we are continuing to do what we do every day at CyberArk, which is to make sure that we take care of all identities, whether they're human or machines. So that's the good news. And we're excited about being here because being a part of Palo Alto Networks opens up a lot more additional resources at our disposal to continue to make the innovations that we do to help out not just our customers, but to help out our partners like Alchemy as you help your customers. So without that, let's get to the 47-day world. Okay. This is what we're talking about. This is the reality. 47 days is going to happen in 2029. But really, for those of you who may not understand what this is or what's happening, a lot of people refer this to as the CAB form mandate. So I'd like to ground us in who the CAB form is first, and then start to talk about even get into the dates that you had put up there, Pete. So first and foremost, this is the CAB forum. The CAB forum is actually, when people look at this, it's a voluntary group, but it's a voluntary group that has a lot of power. It's kind of like the governance around, if you want to think of it like an open source community who governs that particular part of the open source code or what you're doing. These people do it around certificate, what do you call it? The CA browser form, browser-based certificates. And it's in two parts. There's the browser component, which are the big hitters, Microsoft, Apple, Google, those kind of folks. They sit there in the CAB forum, but it's also the CA browsers, the CA certificate folks and the DigiCerts, the Satigos, the Global Signs, used to be Entrust, Entrust. And we at CyberArk also sit here on the committee. So we actually come together and we talk about the best way to be able to manage certificates. This group is actually comes through and we set up the rules of the road. And the rules of the road today is actually there's a 47-day mandate of the life cycle of a certificate. We're moving towards that in 2029. And what you see here for us, the first date was March 15th. We're 3 days away, 3 days after it. After March 15th, all TLS certificates currently will have a 200-day expiration date. They used to have a 398-day life cycle. Now it's 200 days, and they will get shorter. This phased rollout begins now, and it'll continue all the way through to 2029. It gets shorter and shorter. And the reason there's a phased rollout, Pete, is because we want people to ease into this instead of just shocking the system. Because these browser-based certificates are really important to organizations, especially as everyone is moving into the digital space. All that digital investment that's been made, a lot of it is actually built around browser-based applications. So we've got to try to ease into this because if we shock the system, there's going to be a lot of outages.
So
Now,
Nick, the number 47, it seems kind of an oddball number. Is there a reason why it's 47 days?
well, part of that is real simple. It gets your attention, doesn't it? If we would have
Yeah.
said 45, if we would have said 30, 30 would have really got people's attention, but 47 gets people's attention. That's one of the reasons behind it. And we also know that most people from a 47-day, there's some buffer zones in there. So they're going to get to about 40 days. And we'll talk about that later. But that's really it. It gets people's attention. People understand it. I mean, what happens now is it means you're going to rotate these things not just once, every 45 days, but you're like 47. What does that really mean? It's an attention grabber, basically. Now, the other part around those 47 days, if you don't comply by 2029 or even the 200 days, that last bullet point you see on the screen, this is how it gets enforced. It's going to get enforced at the root program level of the browsers. So those browsers will be looking for certificates that have a 200-day expiration date. If they don't, and there's a little wiggle room this first year, but if they don't, they can basically shut down your web portal. They can shut down your website. They can shut down any application that has an entrance or using some type of web-based or CA vendor certificate. So that's the reason for your first, one of your questions was, do you really understand where all your TLS certificates are? And that's because some TLS certificates have been classified as internal certificates because they support internal applications, but basically they have a web front to them. So you need to know that that is potentially a software CA vendor browser certificate that is supporting an internal application, which potentially means you want to make sure it's going to actually fall under the 47-day mandate. Does that track? Because that's what you're looking for. You're
Yep.
not just saying all the ones I've classified externally in my spreadsheets or that I currently potentially in the system are there. Over the last 5 to 7 years, a lot of people have just said internal application, external certificate, internal certificate. we've put too much browser-based stuff over the top of internal applications that that's what that's your unknowns that you're looking for. And
Yeah,
and and
and so in line with that, there's a question that just came in, and a couple of people are actually asking this kind of in different ways. But how does this affect? The question is the 47-day issue in the browser. Does it also force the date limit on a private CA?
no, actually it doesn't. So that's what you want to also find out is you want to make sure you have a good delineation between the two. So if you have a 2-year certificate, maybe 5-year certificate that are what I would classify as an internal certificate, private CA, then you don't fall under the 47-day mandate. However, if we're going to talk about is automation, I've been in a lot of discussions in the last 6 to 8 months of organizations saying, if I can automate my external certificates to 47 days, then, and we're doing this for a level of security because the more you rotate the certificates, the more secure your basically your systems are. Why wouldn't I do that to my internal certificates? And it's like you can automate both external and internal certificates. It is a choice. And a lot of organizations are like, since I have one control plane in the CyberArk system, I can control both, so I can actually change that policy. It's like, yes, you can, which
Yeah,
means your internal systems are just as secure as your external systems.
cool.
And that takes us to here.
Yeah, and I'll
And
just
that
say, keep asking the questions. These are great questions, and there's one I'm saving because I know the slide's coming up and it's going to align nicely. So,
All right. So, I mean, and this is what you're trying to do. So, this wasn't just done to make our lives difficult. It was done to basically talk about how we have greater security around browser and how we eliminate the blast radius, whether it's a hacker trying to take over a website or whether it's just having an outage altogether. And it's securing the ability to drive revenue or keep operations flowing. This is allows us to be able to say it's going to be secure and it's going to be resilient because you're no longer in a manual process waiting for someone to renew a certificate lifecycle or renew a certificate. What you're doing is you've automated it, which allows you to continue business without having to worry about any type of manual intervention. And that's really important. But now the secret here is you've got to be in a position to automate. You can't continue down a manual process, but you're going to have to automate. And that's because there's a wall of work that potentially could hit you. So when we talk about that, this is kind of what we're talking about here, Pete. And here's one of those little secrets. You see March, which is right now, it's 2x per year. So that's 200 days. That's the life cycle. So going from 398 to 200 is a huge leap because if it's 398 days, I could take the number of my certificates and I could put them across 2 years, basically, if I wanted to, essentially, because I've got 398 days. With 200, I don't have that luxury anymore. All of my certificates, all of my external certificates have to be renewed, and you're probably going to go through this cycle at least twice. When you get to 2027, which is just next year, you go to 100 days. Now, the difference between 100 and 200, someone's like, well, it's 4x. Why do you have 4x plus? Well, that's because your buffer zone, usually in a certificate world, we have a buffer zone where it's like, even if it's 100 days, we are trying to get that certificate renewed probably by the 90-day mark. So we don't have any exceptions. So that means there could be an additional crank for some of your certificates that are now at 100 days. And it's that buffer zone, as the number of days shrinks, the buffer zone shrinks as well. That's why in 2027, you could be facing anywhere from 8 to 12x, meaning if I have a 5-day buffer zone on 47 days, that means every 42 days I'm renewing certificates, which puts you close to the 10 to 11x mark. That's what's happening. That's the compounding of trying to be able to say, I've got to renew the certificate, but I also have to have a buffer zone. So just in case something happens, I have time to react and I don't cause an unnecessary outage. That's the key component here because that's where the wall of work starts to really accelerate. Now, this is one of the slides that most people like when we go to market, like when I do the lunch and learns with Alchemy or when I sit with the Alchemy consultants, this is the one that executives start to look at and say, that kind of makes sense. Okay, I kind of get that. So they combine this side. And what I really like about Alchemy is you guys get into the details. You actually look at the number of certificates. So you in this particular case, you have 500 external certificates, Mr. Executive. But by 2029, if you can imagine this, there's going to be 10,000 life cycles you're going to have to potentially manage. You're going to go from 500 to 10,000. That's the wall of work. That's what we're trying to help you avoid. That's what we're trying to help you get ahead of. So this is where reality starts to hit. And we've had people say, I remember we were in Houston. Someone's like, well, I've only got 100 certificates, so 500, it means nothing to me. I'm like, well, actually, it does. Because that 100 certificates becomes almost 1,200, or actually, we're going to round up 1,200 life cycles you have to manage. There's still a wall of work. It's just at a little smaller scale. And in most cases, you're the only one in the PKI world, aren't you? They're like, yeah, can you handle 1,200 life cycles in a year? It's like, I can barely handle the 100 or the 50 because I've spread it out over 2 years. I don't think I can handle 1,200. That's when it's like, yep, that's why we need automation.
Yeah. I can't even handle kids' sports in a week. And, mind you, the one certificate you forget about and, it expires and you say, oh, I forgot about that certificate. But we have a lot of good questions. So I'm going to start with hopefully an easy one because it plays nicely to this slide. But does this process support wildcard certificates?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it does. And there's a reason for a wild card certificate. And that's actually, there are, and I know people are like, no, there isn't, but there is. There is a good use for them. But what we're discovering, Pete, in that thing is that wildcard certificate, it's one certificate, but it probably goes across multiple machines, let's say. And as a result, it's a one to many. So when some people say, I only have 50 certificates and, and 10 of them are wildcards. The next question we always ask, which actually I stole from one of the Alchemy consultants, is how many instances do you have? And they're like, what do you mean? Those 10 wildcards, how many instances does it support? They're like, well, I got 10 wildcards. They support about 35 machines. They're like, so you actually have 35 life cycles to manage. And they're like, oh, because you have a one-to-many relationship. If you have one certificate that goes across, let's just say 3 machines, if that certificate goes down, all 3 machines go down. So now it's like we have an opportunity to actually come back and do a little leveling, saying, do we really need the wildcard certificate, or do we really want to go a one-to-one relationship because we can automate this? Meaning, instead of one certificate taking down 3 machines and potentially stopping an application from running altogether, I can have 3 certificates across 3 machines. If one certificate goes down, then only one machine goes down. The other two are up and running to keep that application going. So now we're working on resiliency. So and that's a whole other thing that I think when you're the consultants around what Alchemy does, it starts to bring that up so we can change the process, change the way we work. And a lot of people don't consider that. But it's like you now have that opportunity not just to eliminate wildcards, but you have the opportunity to make one-to-one relationships where it makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense. Now,
that,
as we dig into this, there's a lot of good questions coming in, and I want to preface this. There's a few folks who've asked about, is there a tool? Well, we're going to show you. We're going to talk about the tool in a second, so give it a second. But I got an interesting question, and one of them I'll do the first one, but the second one is more of a tongue-in-cheek kind of jab, I guess you could say. But in order to renew every 47 days, is a CSR and new private key required, or does it vary depending on your CA? That's a question that came in.
it all depends on how you're configured. So it's not going to, the key itself, you don't have to, but here's the other thing. If I can automate my certificate, I can automate key rotation, which
Okay.
is which is even more important. Keys are the keys to the kingdom. What we usually tell people, what we've seen from working with organizations, the first thing they go after now are the certificates to automate. But the next thing they go after is the SSH keys. Can I do my own key rotation instead of having it just sit out there? The answer is yes, you can. And the CyberArk certificate lifecycle management, I should say the CyberArk machine identity platform allows you to do that and
Okay.
allows you to have that governance and control over those rotations as well as the automation. So that's what you're really trying to play here. Is there a tool? The answer is not a tool, it's a platform. We can take care of certificate lifecycle management, but then the platform itself can be expanded to workload identities AI, SSH keys, code signing, all that sits there. And it's now, what's the first thing you go after first? Well, right now it's going to be Cap Forum. But what's really good about what Alchemy does when they sit with their customers is they build that roadmap. So once we solve this issue and challenge, we're going to have time savings and cost savings that we can apply to the next challenge, which is what you'll be facing anyway, because we have post-quantum coming up and agentic AI. So guess what? All of your machine identity management begins to be moved into the modern world. And I haven't even touched Kubernetes, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's workload itself. So
yep.
again, we're now at a point where it's like you need to be not just thinking in small silos, but everything that goes across it. And that's one of the nice parts of the consulting folks at Alchemy to do. Let's just not think about what we do in 2026, but what's 27, 28, 29, and 30 look like, so that we can not
Nice.
just get ahead of this wall of work. Because this is the other part that people don't realize is this wall of work isn't just the PKI folks. This is the process. And if you're in a manual world, it's anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. This one shows 4 hours per certificate, so it's the middle point. But this is the process, start to finish. And people look at you like, what? It's like, yeah, it's in 3 steps. There's the enrollment, which is generally the PKI team, right? That's the request, get the approval, approval required, and then I hand the certificate off to someone. That's what you just saw in your poll, the multiple ownership. I own the enrollment portion of it. I don't own the provisioning portion of it. And then someone else, or maybe it's back to me, I own the expiration portion of it. So this is the multiple handoffs that happen that you're trying to be able to automate across everything. Some people who said we're semi-automated, they've done the enrollment part. We've automated the enrollment part. That's only part of that process. They haven't automated the provisioning part. An expiration, well, that's pretty easy peasy if you just let the certificate expire. If it's 3 days away and just let it expire, or you put in the revocation, that's again could be another team. But this is the whole entire process you're dealing with, and it takes about on average about 4 hours. And we've done these studies with organizations big and small. It's about 4 to 4.5 hours to do this. And the dirty little secret is the one in the middle, which is provisioning. 75% of the workload is done either in IT or DevOps. They're the application owners, the sysadmin people. So not only are you going to help out your PKI team in an automated world, but you're also going to be able to do a whole lot of cost avoidance and time savings to the IT team itself, IT proper, which means they can now work on other things that are in their to-do box. This is what you've got to lay out in front of someone, because if it takes 4 hours to do this, can you imagine what happens when you go back to this? And I've got to do it 1,200 times in less than 2 years. That's 4,800 hours. Barely keep up in 2025. And now I got 4,800 hours of potential work in front of us.
Yeah.
That's what you want to have your executives to start thinking about. That's the connection. Because if you don't solve this problem and you don't automate, this is what happens. This is the blast radius. Or as I like to say, this is what you're protecting, Pete.
Yeah. This is the 1 a.m. phone call or the weekend disruptor.
Yep.
So as we're talking about this, so a question came up around kind of the breadth of what CyberArk covers. And he asked about, do you satisfy like Apache and JIT, Tomcat, Citrix NetScaler, load balancers, AWS, network devices? Does this bring us all together to simplify that?
Yep. And I think what you've seen is when CyberArk brought us together, Venafi was 20 years old. And the nice part of what we brought to CyberArk was the largest integrations across the entire machine identity management, because we've been doing it for 20 years. So, yep, we can take care of AWS, Azure, Google, any of the major, private or public cloud providers for that matter. And any integration in any SIMs or, Microsoft ADCS if you want to, although we have a solution for that as well. We can actually replace Microsoft ADCS if you'd like for your private CA. So the thing about it is the depth and breadth is really what you guys at Alchemy can come together, because we have over, I think it was 300 integrations that are native when I say native, we have APIs. We don't have anything. We actually have the native integrations that are happening there so that when we upgrade, we actually push that out to our partners, or if our partners upgrade, they push them back to us. And we're able to say, okay, when we do our own upgrades or we do our own patches, we know that they're in sync. And that's a big, big, big advantage when it comes to what you're looking for. So we are pretty much platform or environment or integration agnostic to an extent. It's very, very rare that we come across someone that we haven't already integrated to.
So, all right, I'm gonna put a controversial, I don't want to say controversial, but
Sure.
tongue-in-cheek question because I'm getting blown up on email. And in the Q&A, it's great. I love this. Keep the questions coming. And yeah, I disabled the chat just as FYI because I find the Q&A is a little bit more organized. It helps me and my team follow up more succinctly. So, don't if you have a question, you can go anonymously, but yeah, email me. I don't either way, it doesn't matter. But I saw an email, but this question is very similar and it's kind of tongue in cheek. So, I guess I'm going to paraphrase it because it's basically saying, hey, what is the security reason to force this? If you're looking kind of forced through the trees kind of thing, isn't it increasing the revenue of the people who hold the CAs, right? And, tongue in cheek, is it going to reduce the cost of those CAs?
I can't tell you about the CAs because I'm not a CA provider. I'm not DigiCert. I'm not Sectigo. And that the answer to his question is currently the answer is yeah, you're going to be using more certificates. You're going to be asking for more certificates. So potentially, unless you're in there negotiating with them, hopefully you can get what do you call it? A mass discount, like a Costco discount or Sam's Club discount on the number of certificates. So I can't speak to that, but the tongue in cheek is he's right. You're going to be using more certificates, and if you're paying on a per certificate basis, you're going to, you're going to run up your bill. Now, next step. So he's got a good question because just how was it? December up in Canton, I can't remember. Nah, in December, Alchemy asked a good question to one of their customers. They said, so why are you using CA browser type certificates on these type of machines? You don't have to. They could be an internal CA. So this is the other part that you have a chance to do is actually look at your inventory and say, we may have 500 CA browser certificates, but we've deployed 200 of those certificate browsers to internal systems that don't need it. They're not browser based, but they're basically we needed certificates that we just issued those certificates there. So that's part of what we're going to be discussing is get your knowns so that you can actually think about I can reduce potentially the number of CA browser certificates I'm using because I'm using them in places that I don't need them or I have other alternatives to them. And we've been going through that with a few customers who are like, I can take that inventory and take out maybe 300 to 400 because they're in a place that we could use a self-signed certificate versus a CA browser type of certificate. So those are all good things to be able to work through. And those are some of the best practices that when I find myself sitting next to an Alchemy practitioner that they're bringing to the customer. Everything is on the table right now, and all the questions are being asked. That's the opportunity we have right now is instead of just trying to solve a point solution, let's actually take a look at everything from a larger perspective and then begin to narrow it down so that we can really make some good decisions based upon data. So if you take a look at because this is what you're protecting, right?
Yep.
This is literally what you're protecting. And this is the part that ties to the business. This gets the executives, their ears pop up. Are you telling me our online checkout could go down? The answer is yeah. You're in the middle of spring break, like you said. Can you imagine if you're trying to forget about TSA, but if you're in an airport and the luggage system goes down because the certificate wasn't updated and your luggage is now off, could be off to you're sitting in, Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, right? And your luggage is sitting in Palm Springs, right? Those are big differences. Those are how you affect customers and people. On the other side, which is the right side here, this is what could potentially happen when you're trying to get just internal work done. behind the scenes. You could have block logins because it's a web-based type of portal for your remote employees, right? You could be looking at even some compliance violations in regards to, being able to secure machine-to-machine communication, whether you have to comply with NIST or you've got to comply with DORA if you're overseas, if you're dealing with European operations, or if you're trying to even get through some of the ISO stuff. So again, these are what you're protecting or you're trying to be able to take care of so that you don't have this type of a blast radius. This is the connection to the business. Now, again, this is, I'm not going to try to make anyone afraid, but this is what you need to be able to tell your management team. This is why we have to solve this problem, and we can solve it. That's the one thing I want to make sure people walk away with. You can solve this problem. We are at a point where you've just got to break down and whatever metaphor you want to use, we're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time. All right. So that's what we come down to. We compartmentalize and we figure out how we begin to approach this from a system, from a good system standpoint, framework standpoint, but one task, one thing at a time, not trying to solve or boil the ocean, whatever metaphor you want to use. Make sense?
Yes, sir. And then, all right, so how do we solve this problem?
All right,
Is
so
what
this is
everybody
it.
wants to know.
So this is what actually happens. So
Yep.
most of the time when we deal with the teams, there's five main things that play out here. One is centralized visibility, one control plane to hold it all, right? And you get full inventory. Right now, you're looking at full public TLS inventory. That's what you need. And that's going to be, I'm going to run to the end. That's what we're going to offer anyone on this webinar is the opportunity for us. Let us help you scan your domains. We don't even have to install anything. I could scan your domain right now if I have the domains you want me to go look at and to find out what TLS certificates and the instances that those certificates are attached to, right? So right now it's to centralize. That's the biggest part. A central location. So I know all my AWS certificates, all my Azure certificates, all my own website certificates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then as part of that, when we work through some of the details, you make sure you understand the ownership. And the ownership just isn't the guy who's in charge of that, the DevOps guy. It's actually also the team, because that DevOps guy could be on spring break right now. And if something goes down, you got to know what team am I contacting. So again, we've got to play with that. And also the policies that we want to make sure we have around those certificates. The SLAs, we've got to be cognizant of that because we know that not only do I have an SLA for a certificate, I know that an application owner has an SLA for uptime. And then I got to make sure I've got a full tracking of documentation or changes or things that happen potentially if I have to report to a regulatory body. And then the last part is got to start prioritizing high risk certificates. So these are the five things that you start to look at now that a lot of teams, leading teams are doing as we speak. And the way you start that is this. This is the process. There's 5 steps. We're only going to talk about the first 2 because that's what you got to do in the next 30 days, 30 to 45 days. I'll give you a couple more weeks. The other steps 3, steps 4, and step 5, those are all good. And those have to happen. That's the automation portion of it and the monitoring. But you cannot go to step 3 without going through step 1 and step 2 at this point because the clock is now ticking. A lot of people just did step 1 and then they skipped over step 2 and they went straight to step 3. And that was in 2025. Where like you're at the point where you've got to do step 2, which is the prioritization and find that business impact. Because those are the certificates you're going after to automate first.
So Nick, just let's quantify this for the audience really quick. So to do this scan, how much time are we talking? Just to get an idea of how many certs are actually out there.
So we've been on this call for what, 15, 20 minutes,
Yep.
25 minutes? So it takes about basically 10, maybe 15 minutes to do the scan if I know the domain. That's it.
Okay. And so
You take,
you'll have an idea of how you can deal with step number 2. And so then
yep.
part of our process, Alchemy's process, so we come in, we'll help you do the scan, and then we help you prioritize where you need to pay attention. So
Yep.
I'm going to put a link in the chat, and you can set up a scan through my team, and we'll get you set up. We'll get you with the right people, and you
Yep.
guys can see how this product works live. So
Yep. And so here's another part. So you guys ask, so what am I going to see out of this scan? Well, let's just talk about that. So in the visibility, which is the scan you're talking about, is those are the three goals, but this is what we're talking about with context. What we're going to be able to do, what the platform does, it just gives you not just the certificate or the type of certificate, the machine it's attached to and its expiration date. It starts to look at the key size, the key algorithm size, the validity, the app or service it's attached to, right? The team owner. All this becomes good context that you get through that discovery, that first stage, that full visibility. That's what you're looking for to get you to the next stage, which is number two, right? That's the part you want to start to think about. You get all this information, which you get from the platform, the CyberArk platform, and what you end up doing with it is phase two. Because what you want to be able to say is not all certificates are equal. You're a coach, Pete. Not everyone is, not everyone gets a trophy. I'm a coach. I coached softball for 12 years, actually going on 14 now, but not everyone gets a trophy, right? Not everyone is special. And that's what you're getting through this context is finding out who's special, who's not, who goes on the travel team, who just stays on the rec team because that's what they want to do, right?
yep,
So this, step one, this is actually mandatory. Step two is this. Once you have that context, you now know what that cert protects. You know how exposed it is, meaning one certificate that goes across multiple machines, high exposure. One certificate running all of your online retail website, high exposure. What happens if it fails? That's the part of the context in the business. I lose that certificate, I lose my retail shop online. I lose that certificate, I lose one of my manufacturing lines in the plant. Or I've blocked all of my accountants out of our accounting system. Who owns it? And then how hard is it to replace? Meaning, is it hard? Is it one to many? Meaning one certificate, I got to go replace it in 5 or 6 locations. That's hard to do because that could be five or six different teams or owners. That's the part that context starts to expose because these are your high risk certs. Because once you have the context, you're like, okay, I'm going after all the certificates that are my login, my portals, my payment, my APIs, my billing, the gateways, anything, right? Remote access, my F5s, my financial, applications. You start to look for those. And again, it doesn't take weeks and months to do. This is, I've got a report. Let's sit down over the next 2 days, figure out what those high risk certs are. And now we're just going to do good data scientists will do or analysts will do. We'll start to actually create the list that we need to go after first. And that's the part where people really say, oh, I'm just going to go after the certificate that's expiring in May. Well, honestly, if that certificate that's expiring in May is the sales team's Tableau report, I don't care. But the certificate that takes care of my online shopping, even though it expires in August, that's the one I care about to make sure I've got that fully wrapped and fully baked. The internal report, I'll take care of that, but the external, I'm going after that one first because that's the lifeblood of the company. Those are the things that you have to have a discussion around. Too many people just go after the low-hanging fruit, and the low-hanging fruit is those aren't going to affect your business. The low-hanging fruit are the easy ones. Now, I should come back. The hardest part of what we're talking about isn't the platform. The hardest part about what you're doing is the education of the people that you're handing these certificates to, because they have SLAs. If it's an IT guy or if it's a DevOps person, you got to explain to them how you're automating, how it's going to work. So you've got to make sure they understand. Otherwise, if you don't, they'll lock you out. So I always tell people when you're doing this is where Alchemy comes in really well, is don't forget the change management. And that's what you guys don't forget. You guys will come in and say, all right, we're going to do a proof of concept. We're going to do the F5 servers. We've got the IT people here. We're going to tell them what we're about to do. We're going to show them. We're going to do a quick little proof of value or POC so that they're like, oh, so it does work. Yep. Now we're going to do this across all of the F5 servers. Boom. We've got the use case done, the F5 server use case. We've proven it works. So now that more people have confidence, we can do the automation. And
And then, so
and I
yeah,
think the other part, go
can
ahead.
you, so you're jumping to this slide. A lot of people are asking about kind of the automation piece,
Mhm.
and I'll just say to the audience, we got a lot of great questions, and I'll be honest with you, the content got derailed. So my commitment's very simple. I'm going to put up a link, and you guys can get a hands-on scan with our team. So just stay tuned, and I'll get that link up and follow up. I put it in the chat, by the way. But yeah, let's talk about automation. But a couple questions to twine into that, and we got about 8 minutes left, so I don't. Someone asked about certs that require third-party vendors to apply. How is this handled as part of this whole process and the automation process?
So here's what we love about the platform is if you have a third party vendor who has a certificate, you have a couple questions asked. Mr. Vendor, can I update that certificate? Will you allow me to reach in or have that area pull? It's a push or a pull. So either I can push the certificate to you, Mr. Vendor, or you can actually request a certificate pull and I will send it to you. So this is where you work with your vendors. This is where those integrations come into play most likely because there's probably two tools coming together. So you have a choice. You can reach in and say, I know that vendor that when I can't do a handoff to that vendor, they've got a certificate and it's about to expire. I've either got to alert them or I can, and if the certificate's coming from me, I can actually renew it through the process, the automated process. So this is where you hopefully have a good relationship with
Okay.
that third party vendor because you're going to do one of two things. And I threw up on the screen because we're at 8 minutes. There's going to be a push automation or a pull automation. Those are high level. How it actually gets done is where you work with Alchemy to determine. But just want to let people know a push automation means basically it's usually deployed like legacy systems or on-prem applications or traditional infrastructure. Push means I know I've got a certificate expiring. The system tells me I have to push it to a machine. And that's usually on-prem. I know it, I'm pushing it to the machine. Pull, though, is what you're seeing now in the cloud. The microservices, the things like that. The pull means the application knows I've got a certificate coming. I'm going to go pull a certificate from the system. So that's actually a lot better when it comes to short-lived certificates like Kubernetes clusters, Kubernetes containers, sorry. The containers spin up, spin down. I need a certificate. I got to go pull it. Boom, spin it up, spin it down. Certificate, those short-lived ephemeral certificates are usually pull. And again, this is where when you understand the context you got from the first stage, you start to determine which method and then the sub methods underneath it, depending on the machine or how you want to have your policies handled. And those are all things that the Alchemy team works through with you so that you're not guessing or you're not searching through open source, communities trying to find it. You guys have some of the best practices around when it comes to getting in there, getting it done right in a quality manner. I can't tell you getting it done right is probably the most important thing, especially as the clock starts to tick now. And then basically the last part in that best in class that you see on the screen is you're going to match your method of automation to the environment. And that's probably the biggest thing that I always tell people. You've got to match it. And you got to take considerations are going to be risk, environment, or the audit trail or the policy checks that you need so that you're making sure that you're not just doing something, but if you have to fall in line with a regulatory body, if you're a bank or even HIPAA, if you're in healthcare, I now have the audit trail. That is, if in case someone asks me, I want to see the audit trail or I want to see what that process is. What's your control on this particular requirement? You've got it because that's actually what the platform will play out as well. You'll be able to have everything in a documented fashion You don't have to document. The system does it behind the scenes through the way it interacts, the metadata, and the information it's capturing. But you can't get here. And then if you do all this, the automation, what's really nice about what you do at Alchemy is you guys actually have come through and taken that compliance mandate and turned it into a modernization plan. So it's like not only are we going to solve the CAP forum, then we get the SSH keys and secrets, then we start going through the compliance, then the governance, because you're going to prove it all out in that step one process here. And I can't tell you how many times a CISO or a CIO has gone into their leadership meeting saying, I am solving step one, but I am building the platform or I'm building the strategy to go after steps two, three, four, and five. And I've got a partner here that's helping me get through two, three, four, and five. It's called Alchemy. But you can't do any of this unless you do those first two things first, Pete.
Okay.
That's where it all starts. And
Cool.
then,
Well, we're coming up at the top of the hour, and so I'll cap this with the interesting question, and hopefully it will tie into
yeah,
this. But someone put an interesting question. I've also heard that by May 2026, public CAs will sunset the client authentication, client auth, extended key usage EKU from the public TLS server certificates. Can you speak to that? So that's a pretty interesting question. If we got to take that one offline, you got to send me a white paper. Great.
yeah,
But
we'll
that's
take that offline because the answer is the discussions are going on. Is it going to be a mandate like 47 days? We don't know yet, but it is now being discussed and debated. So there's a whole bunch of train of thought in that. So I'd rather take that offline if we can.
sure. And someone asked about links. I'm going to send a couple follow-on emails to today's session, and there's a lot of great questions that came up. And here I'm going to bring up my screen and
Yep, I'll stop
um,
sharing, but I'm going to tell you flat out when he brings this up, guys, start with that scan. Start with
So bringing back up these dates, really the summary here is pay attention to the dates because what's going to be most impacted is the management of around their certificates. And when you get to that 47-day window, you have on average a 10 to 12 time renewal per cert. So you times that by the number of certs, and the impact to the business is pretty significant. So, that's really what you want to pay attention to is how does this impact the core business, whether it's a simple thing as transacting on your website, securing a portal, things like that. There's little things that you don't think about. And again, getting that phone call in the middle of the night or on the weekend. And so the first thing I want to show is, and again, I'll be sending these out as well as part of my follow up. Is we have what we call our certificates strategy session. You can come in and we'll help you understand, what is CyberArk Verify do, and then also run a scan if you would like to. And again, the scan is very quick and it will give you an idea of all the certs you have out there. Nothing gets installed, and you get a general good understanding of where you stand today, and then that step number two. All right, how do I prioritize it? And then the rest of the steps is how do you layer in the automation framework with CyberArk and Venafi. The other thing we do offer is what we call it's a machine identity assessment workflow. And so this is a cool little tool that I working with CyberArk folks on. And behind the scenes, they ask you a bunch of questions and then they spit out a cool little report, and it gives you some good anecdotes to consider around machine identity. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here is machine identity, and it's just another form of identity that's out there in the wild. And this machine identity is morphing as we get further and further into AI, Nuberts, et cetera. So, in CyberArk covers all these different scenarios. And then finally, we do offer what we call our identity strategy mastermind. And this is a session that we come in, it's complimentary, and you get to talk to some of our security experts and understand kind of where you sit. And as part of this, we're going to do a mini version of a machine identity scenario, and we'll probably be launching just a dedicated one very soon. And we can focus on machine identity certificates, etc., to get your head around what do you have, and we can help you strategize on the path forward around what to do or when it comes to certificates. So
hey,
these are
Pete,
three call to actions, and I'll pause. Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
I want to say this last one, the Identity Strategy Mastermind. is probably one of the more is really important when we get into with other organizations because it combines both human and machine. That machine component is there, but you'll start to see how those two areas are beginning to actually blend together. That one right there, that one is I've recommended it to so many CISOs or CIOs to actually start thinking through it. That's a worthwhile session to set up right there.
Cool. And then I'll let you, I'm gonna have I might tee up for your final thought, but everybody's asking about the scan and how to, just a general gist of how it works because there's a concern around security, things like that. But before we jump into that, coming up in our next three, I got three core sessions coming up. So we got I'm introducing a new kind of sub series, what I'm going to call Alchemy in the Lab Unfiltered. And essentially the goal around that is I'm going to feature a vendor and they can only do a demo. So that's going to be a new series I'm promoting. And then keep an eye out. I'm going to do two summits this year that are going to focus on a specific topic. But here's our next three in the labs. And I will be sending out, I'll be blasting out our newsletter, but also sending out emails on these as well. And so with that, I'm going to say any final thoughts, Nick, as we close out today's session. And, I don't know if you want to comment about the scan, how intrusive it is it secure? Because that's a lot of the concerns I'm seeing with some of the comments here.
It's not intrusive at all because the certificates are publicly facing. The scan is actually done. Nothing's installed, nothing's put into your system. You can do this across any domains that are out there because again, you're looking for public facing certificates. Nothing's looking for your internal certificates or going to look at internal systems. So it's nothing that you can't already find on the internet. So the scan is not intrusive at all. It doesn't require you to install any agents or any of that nature. It just understands what's your domain. And as a result, we can make that scan happen. It's just very specific looking for TLS certificates. So not intrusive at all. And we can go into more details when you can call us and we'll walk you through all the steps in even greater detail, just to make sure that you understand it and send you out some documentation around it so that you can have it. Maybe share it with some of your colleagues. So
Awesome. And yeah, any one last final thought you want to leave the audience with before we jump off today?
there's no, the biggest thing is don't panic. There's time. Just break this into, component parts, which is what Alchemy can help you with, so that you're not trying to, you don't have to panic. That's probably the biggest thing. Break it down into manageable parts, and you'll be able to get through 2026 very well and set yourself up for 2027, 2028.
Awesome. Well, thank you for jumping in today, Nick. I sincerely appreciate it, and thank you to the audience for jumping in. I'm gonna go on record and say that this is the most questions we've been asked in one of our sessions to date, to the point where it derailed our content. So, but I'm gonna tell you right now that that's what we like. So keep the questions coming in future sessions, but also definitely follow up with us and take advantage of some of the expertise we carry around some of the smart guys like Mark Grassman, Pascal. We got a lot of great people here that can help you navigate this future. So, with that, I'm going to say thank you for joining and have a great rest of your weeks. And as I always say, have a good day and see y'all on the flip side.